but pour in a great cause and you get to have a good weekend. All right, so we're going to keep it going here. We've got Jeff Erickson, Mike Gianella, and Christopher Weber. Thanks for being here, y'all.
Anytime.
We are going to
Hi,
keep
friends.
it going. Take it away. Value picks past 300.
That's right. All right, so it's draft champion season. A lot of slow drafts going on right now. We're drafting pretty deep. And let's face it, we know things that we like. We know things that we don't like. We're trying to find some targets. We thought we'd approach it a couple ways here. First of all, let's introduce ourselves. First of all, get to know each other. Hi, I'm Jeff. Nice to see you guys. Chris, I haven't had a chance to talk with you before. I've drafted with Mike many times, but happy to meet you. Let everybody know. Tell me more about you.
Well, firstly, you're not missing much. We lost a couple minutes at the start here. I'm hoping we can make sure that those 2-3 minutes come directly out of my time and not you guys. I think that's the best use of our resources here. But no, I'm with Pitcherlist. I do a podcast there called In the Deep with my co-host Jordan White, and this is our specialty. We do deep leagues. We refuse to ever mention anybody whose ADP starts with a 2 or is rostered in anything more than I think the threshold's 25% during in-season stuff. So hopefully I can bring some good nuggets here. Aside from that, I'm a community manager in the Pitcherlist Discords, which is a great and fun place, which I think is showing in the chat and with a lot of our panels.
Nice, very nice. Where are you?
Oh, I'm in New York, New Jersey.
Okay.
Right. / New Jersey.
Mets?
Yeah.
Yankees,
unfortunately.
Okay. And Mike, good to talk to you again. It's been a while. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I hope the connect holds up. There's this weather event going on here, and it's just started. And Chris, you're probably in the same boat, I'm sure, with the weather. I actually listened to Chris's podcast, and I have to give it a shout out because it's great. I love deep leagues. I've been at Baseball Prospectus for 10 years, but I started out with a blog, and all I did was blog about NL and AL only. I play deeper mix now. In addition to that, I'm very similar. That's my wheelhouse, and I suspect that's why I was asked to this panel. And I really admire both of your work, so it's great to be on here.
I love doing this. I love going deep. I do all the projections for RotoWire, and and I'm going to learn a few guys here that I've done a projection for a couple of them, and others I haven't. And I'm going to learn about it along with you guys. So we're going to have some fun with this. Before we get into some of our targets, I wanted to first do what we aren't comfortable waiting on. What do you want to prioritize at the beginning of the draft so you don't have to dig deep to try to find in a particular category or a position? Mike, we'll start with you first.
Well, this is kind of obvious, but third base, it's really ugly this year. I kind of you look at it, but it's really bad. Once you get past I'd say 200 ADP, and I don't reach for positions normally outside of maybe catch. This year, there's just too much instability at the bottom and too many questions.
How about you, Chris?
I feel like this is going to be a controversial statement, but it's actually shortstop for me.
Okay.
Now this is going to depend on your league type, because if you're in a standard league, plenty of shortstops to go around. Mm-hmm. If you're in a 16-teamer with a middle infield spot and you're around pick 250, you're going to look at the shortstop list and go, ugh. Because once you get around there, you're looking at steal speculation and subpar hitters, and it's not fun anymore around 250. So if you're talking really deep stuff, shortstop dries up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it's even true in sim leagues. I just did a score sheet mock draft league, 24-team mixed league, and we do this every year to kind of kick off the score sheet season, and we go 16 rounds. If you don't get your shortstop that you want to have and hold forever, if you don't get them in the first 5 or 6 rounds, it gets ugly really fast, especially in that sort of deep long wait for your next pick sort of type of league too. So I can see the logic in that for sure. I think it's really blessed at the top, but yeah, you want to get at least one of those, and I don't mind getting 2 or 3 of them sometimes and dry up the pool for other people. I kind of like doing that.
a lot of them are multi-position eligibility, so people aren't necessarily drafting them to be their shortstop.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And you can get away with that with a few of those guys. I like that there. Starting at the top, Trey Turner, you can stack him at second base there. That's useful. And kind of deprive everybody else of that. Let's talk about targets. I thought we kind of, instead of just mentioning a bunch of guys we like deep, we kind of thought we'd take this systematically. And we're going to attack speed. We're going to try to find late power, late saves, a bounce back player, and a prospect. I think we all know we can find starting pitching and outfield and all that. So kind of wanted to go from more from a categorical standpoint, because that's most of us play category leagues. Chris, why don't you start first? Who's your late stolen base target?
Death taxes, and it's Bradley Zimmer breakout season. I feel like this is every year, but I can't quit Bradley Zimmer, because if you want to see something fun, pull up his spray chart and just look at how far his home runs were hit. I know we're talking about speed, but it's just one of those things that strikes me every time I pull up his Savant page. So Zimmer is perpetually injured, which, that's a problem with a lot of guys, but we're talking late draft steals. So you have to make concessions. You have to take a chance on guys. Zimmer has never in a season, and again, this is only 2 different seasons, but he's never gotten more than 300 plate appearances in a season and not stolen at least 15 bags. When he plays, he steals. And the nice thing about Zimmer is that on top of the steals, he is going to bring other things to the table. So, you can get a guy like Nicky Lopez, who is basically just going to get you batting average and steals, or Bradley Zimmer, I think, brings more to the table. You have to protect against the batting average. It's very likely that the batting average is going to be a sink. But a nice thing about Zimmer is that he brings fantastic defense to the table, which not helpful in fantasy, except for the fact that it leaves him on the field. And availability is the most important thing in fantasy, really.
Absolutely. I've always thought Zimmer to be Grady Sizemore 2.0, and he's lived up to that also with the injuries as well, unfortunately. But
hurts.
I opportunities there, obviously, in Cleveland. I think that's one of the big things too, is you show any sort of ability, you're going to get the playing time. They have some kids coming up, but right now it still looks pretty good for him. Mike, how about you? Who's your late round stolen base target?
Well, I went off the board. I mean, nobody's taking this guy. I went with Drew Waters on Atlanta. I think he's past 700 at ADP, and I get it. He didn't do much last year. He was he was kind of bad in the minors, but he can run. He has a little bit of an opportunity with Ronald Acuna probably not starting on opening day, and the other outfielders there, unless they sign somebody, I think if he has any kind of performance at all in spring training, he might stick. This is just one of those shot in the dark things. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to provide here for people watching this. Is he might not work out. This is a last pick in the draft, but I think it's just one of those things you go for. I will say, Chris, I like the Zimmer pick. That's usually the thing I'm trying to do, someone with experience. But here I thought I'd go with somebody a little more fun and just off the board.
I've had Waters in a couple of keeper leagues forever, and I keep on waiting for him to get that chance. The good news is he's still minor league eligible, so we got that going for us, which is nice. But
yeah, he's also 23. I mean, he's not old by any stretch of the imagination. I think people have heard about him for so long. Yeah, especially dynasty people think, oh my gosh, he's been around forever. I mean, he really hasn't.
How in the world do the Braves have a better success rate with starting pitching prospects than outfield prospects?
It's a good question. Pache, do we like him as well, or is that ship sailed as far as his ability to hit?
I mean, that's another guy that his defense, in theory, should keep him on the field. And if the defense keeps him on the field for 120 games, that'll bag you 20 steals.
Yeah, my guy's kind of. Go ahead.
Oh, I just will say before we move on, I know the BP scouting folks on Pache are we just don't see the defense. I mean, the offense really kind of going with him. So that's kind of the reason why I like Waters, oddly enough.
Makes sense. It makes sense, absolutely. And who knows what's going to happen with Zuna, and who they're going to bring back that are free agents. The Braves offseason story hasn't been finished. Obviously, a lot starts with Freddie Freeman and all that, but who they choose to re-sign among all those outfielders is also a very interesting question. So, Waters, we could see very early. It could just, and he could just force his way into the lineup. I like that one a lot. Mine's kind of a hold your nose sort of guy. I'm going Nick Gordon here. ADP is around 506. here's the thing I like about him is when he runs, he's very successful. 10 out of 11 on the base pass last year. You look at his minor league track record, a good stolen base rate. You know, he younger, like in 2016, he got caught a handful of times. But I think Minnesota's the type of team where he's going to get plenty of chances to play. I think when he plays, he's going to run. And he's one of those guys. He's only outfield eligible right now, which is a little bit of a downfall. I wish he was still shortstop eligible, but I think that there's just plenty of raw speed. You know, I don't like to take the raw speed guys on my starting lineup. I don't want to take Leody Taveras in the 12th round again. You notice I said again. I did that. That was a big failing of mine in labor and a couple other places last year. But you stash a guy like this on your bench if he wins the playing time. We're talking deeper leagues here. I think you can use him and kind of sneak some stolen bases in there. You got to catch the lightning in the bottle a little bit, but give me Nick Gordon at 500, then Nicky Lopez in the 200s. That's kind of my approach.
Love it.
Yeah, it's not. You know, we're not going to brag too much about the power or any other hitting ability. That's the other thing. What do you guys think of Jaren Duran? That was the other guy I listed there. I know he flopped a little bit with his first call up there, but sometimes I like guys that get second turn around when they get the discount off of them.
Actually, I was thinking about bringing him up as my prospect because, one of the categories we're going to get to later, because that's one of the easiest places to find value is big time prospects with big time minor league production who flop in their first 100 plate appearances.
Yep.
Happens all the time. And plenty of those guys go on to have success. Jaron Durant, if Jaron Durant had a 2020 season in the next year or two, I would be surprised 0.
Yeah, I agree. And the fact that Suzuki kind of eliminated the Red Sox as one of his final 4 teams is one more step along the way to him getting playing time. We'll see if the Red Sox
heard that.
Yeah. All 4 teams are teams that train in Arizona. And apparently that was a thing. So that's another thing that's kind of interesting there too. Let's move on. Let's talk a little power. Let's get some late power here. Mike, who do you got as your late power guy?
Well, I mean, this is a top 300, but so this is barely a sleeper. He's just outside the top 300, but it's Patrick Wisdom. I think he's being dismissed too easily. I get it. The strikeout rate is abysmal. It's not really what you want to see. But when he connects, and the opportunity's there for him. I don't see the Cubs signing anyone. I know there's still a lot of moving parts, but if you look at the free agent pool at third base, unless the Cubs bring in someone like Carlos Correa and slot him into third, I think Wisdom's got the reps. And yeah, the average is going to be low, but the raw power is legitimate, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him hit 35, 40 home runs. And you've got to offset that average, so be aware of that if you take Wisdom. But I feel like this is a free power pick.
I agree. And in fact, I know he's not in the top 3. He's not above 300 plus, but I think his teammate Frank Schwindel is being unfairly discounted too. I
agree.
I found myself rostering both. I think there's a lot more late power at first base than there is at third. So if you get stuck at third base, we're talking how we don't like waiting at third base. I think Wisdom's interesting there. Now, if he goes in a massive slump, the problem is there's no pedigree. There's no loyalty, franchise loyalty. He's bounced around. They could move Bote. They could move Horner. They could do a lot of different things there. That would be the one thing that worries me a little bit. But yeah, it's hard. And people don't realize what a year Wisdom had last year, that he actually hit 28 homers. It's because the Cubs were just out of it so early that, I think he got overlooked. And then, of course, they had COVID fest at the end of the season. Plus, he had a wrist thing. So, he didn't finish strong either. So I think he is kind of overlooked. Chris, how about you?
I went with Rowdy Tellez. It's fun when everyone speculates about a trade target and then it happens and then the result is exactly what you hoped it would be. Everyone was like, someone please get Tellez out of Toronto. He needs to play. He's a good bat. And he proved it once he went over to Milwaukee. And I like that he went to Milwaukee specifically because it's Milwaukee must always have a barrel man-esque player on their team. And they got rid of Vogelbach. So I like that they got Tellez to replace that archetype on their team. But actually, when I was looking into him, actually for this, I was a little bit surprised by his profile. I thought that I was going to be looking at more of a 250, 30 home run guy, and I think I've kind of adjusted that in my head to more like a 265, 20 to 25 home run guy. So this isn't the power pick that I thought it was when I had narrowed my list down. Also love like Satsugo. I love Satsugo. Normally, I take every single chance I can get to talk about Yoshi Satsugo. He was one of my sleepers last year, which didn't work out until like August. But yeah, I think Tellez's bat to ball skills are much better than I realized. And his barrel rate's good, which you would think those two things together would lead to a lot of home runs. But so far in his career, it hasn't. Doesn't make him not a good hitter or not a good value. But the stat distribution, I think, is a little bit different than I thought when I first started looking into this.
Susugo had a couple of weeks there where he was hitting a home run like every 5 at bats. It felt like there. The problem was the Pirates would see that, and then they'd bench him for 2 or 3 days. And, it was almost like in a strict platoon. But yeah, he carried some teams in August and September, especially if he played in a league with any sort of depth.
I mean, the Pirates who notoriously know what they're doing.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the Pirates a little bit more later, too. I've got a couple of guys I want to nominate from them. My power guy is Seth Brown. 20 homers and limited at-bats last year. He's going to play a lot this season. If you look at the A's, they're peeling guys off. We're going to, I do the Sunday Night RotoWire podcast with my buddy Scott Jenstad. He's a big A's guy. I'm a big Reds guy. Our fan bases have 2 of the 3 teams that haven't signed a major leaguer this offseason. They're siphoning off talent right now. We're starting our first podcast Sunday night. It should be a fun one there because there'll be a lot of complaining, I'm sure. But at any rate, Brown's going to play. The thing I don't like about Brown is I think he's a fastball only guy. I think you throw him a lot of junk and he's going to struggle. And with more at bats, he might get exposed a little bit more. But I think he's going to run into like 25, 30. And again, we're talking about really deep leagues. We're talking about trying to find guys that find playing time, find guys that you can stick in there when they have the 7-game week, and try to get take advantage of that playing time opportunity. I think with him, you want to look to see if they have. I think he's kind of a streaming outfielder, if you will, or a utility spot, and try to use him when the A's have like 5 or 6 games against righties.
Fair. That reminds me of a guy that I wanted to talk about with the stolen bases. I'm sorry. I'm derailing this. If you listen to In the Deep, you know that is a really bad habit of mine. But Rafael Ortega, to kind of stick with that Wisdom Cubs theme.
Yeah.
Platoon bat, probably like looking at what he did last year, he's almost definitely a platoon bat. But he was really, really good in that like half a year that he was getting pretty regular at bats. Doesn't seem like he can hit lefties worth a lick, but he stole double-digit bags. The contact rates were great, and the power was fine. Like I like him as a deep outfielder.
When teams like the Cubs, the A's, a lot of maybe not the A's, but a lot of teams, playing time is the one thing that they have that they can portion out and try to find some guys like this, late bloomers, and probably try to turn them into trade targets there for other teams that they need help down the stretch, and they can kind of try to find a way to get some future value out of that. So they're going to portion out some of this playing time. Yeah, Ortega's earned that time. He's going to get a lot of run, I think. All right, let's move on to saves. Saves are interesting because we've seen, and I don't know if you've seen this in the drafts you've been doing so far. I've done about 4 or 5 NFBC 50s in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and saves just keeps getting pushed up and pushed up and pushed up. I've seen some drafts in the draft champions leagues where you're seeing at 15, 16 turns, 1-2 turns, some closers are going. So we need to find, if you get left behind on that, you're just uncomfortable pushing saves early, you need to have some late targets. Who are we going to find? Mike, who do you got?
Well, first of all, I agree with your point. It's just been bananas how high saves are going. I haven't done as many drafts, but yeah, watching it's just ridiculous. So I went with a couple names. The name I really like is Robert Suarez, who the Padres signed from Japan. Yep. Has never pitched in the majors, but if you just look at the scouting report, fastball in the upper 90s, easy delivery. Second pitch is a sinker or a change. Like he's kind of gone back and forth between the two. He doesn't really have much of a third pitch. He kind of has a show me slider, but I don't think he needs it. And part of the reason he's my pick is that bullpen is really unsettled. I think anybody could be the closer, and it's sort of a why not him situation. It's not difficult to see if he has a good spring, the team either going with him right away or, maybe going with him as the next man up. Other names, Kyle Finnegan. I'm not really in love with Finnegan. It's more the unsettled bullpen and the price points. I've seen Tanner Rainey going higher, and remember we're in the late phase here. I just want to take I just kind of want to take the cheaper guy here at the end and just be like, you know what, this is a shot in the dark with both these names. I'm going to go with the cheaper name.
I'm glad you brought up Suarez. He'll prevent me from drafting Emilio Pagan for the third year in a row. So I've got that going for me, which is nice.
Do you guys know who Roster Resource has penciled in as the Padres closer right now?
I do not.
Pierce Johnson. Yeah.
I
would not have guessed that.
Interesting. That's weird.
But yeah, absolutely. Why not Robert Suarez if Pierce Johnson is penciled in as the closer?
That is wild. Anyways, and when you look at it, Pomerantz is out. You might go with Luis Garcia. They've got a lot of different names. You're right. It's super unsettled, but they spent a good chunk of change on him. And we got a new manager now, so it might be handled a lot differently in terms of the bullpen too. All right, Chris, who do you have?
I am a big fan of Anthony Bender for several reasons. Most importantly, the name, like having an elite reliever with the last name Bender is just beautiful and perfect, and I love it. But aside from that, the stuff is really fun. Like he's got the most wicked breaking pitch, and it's fitting. But on top of that, he's got a fun, interesting fastball. He throws a sinker primarily, and he elevates it, which is a little bit counterintuitive. So some guys with unique sinkers do get away with that and thrive with that, and he could very easily be one of them. He's one of those guys that you go to the Savant page and everything is bright red. And I believe Floro finished the season as the closer for Miami, and I'm not super threatened by Dylan Floro. He's more of like a consistently good reliever than an elite guy that you want locking down games. I see no reason why Bender couldn't take that job and run with it. And he's going, I believe it was about 460 when I looked.
I like that call. I like Bender's skills. In fact, I just grabbed him in a league. The only thing I'm worried about is sometimes Mattingly likes to go with the veteran and says, forget the skills. I'm just going to stick this guy in here, and we're just going to go with this guy all along. Maybe so they can even flip that guy at the trade deadline. It feels like they might do that. But with Bender, they're going to keep him around for a while.
And he's one of those guys that when he's going right, he's good enough to have on your team even as just like a speculative closer, because he's going to bring stats to your fantasy team even when he's not closing. The strikeouts should be good. The ratios should be good. And he's not going to hurt you.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Can I add a point to that before we move on? Just to add to that, and Chris, you talk about deep leagues. Relievers that are good relievers are better than like your fifth or sixth starters in deep leagues, and it's important like to know when to cycle them in. Know to be like, okay, I'm not going to just chase the crummy win and not get it. So some of these relievers are going to have value in the kind of leagues we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
I will never forget the fury I felt when someone in one of my home leagues, an AL only league, had like two good starters and then just loaded up on relievers and just swept 4 pitching categories. It was so infuriating.
I've done it. I've done that before for sure.
If you maxed out at like Chad Green last year, you got like 6 wins and 10 saves, or maybe it was vice versa, but and tons of strikeouts too. And that's so valuable, especially in a league where you don't have free agents. When we're playing these draft and hold leagues that we're doing, many of the leagues that we're drafting right now are those sort of formats. It's great. It's so nice just to be able to plug and play. Now the problem is you got to trying to time the market on these guys is sometimes tricky. You get like, oh, I want to try to get 2 starts here and I'll just bench him, and that's when he gets a save and a win that week. You're like and all that, but I do like that. I have a couple of guys I wanted to throw out there as possibilities. One, if you want to wrestle the alligator in Seattle and try to deal with whoever the closer of the week is, Drew Steckenrider is going pretty late. I think he's going after Sewald, after Giles, and he's got skills, and he's shown that he can handle the job when given it there. He's another guy where he might be able to plug and play even when he's not closing. And then,
I like it. That Seattle bullpen is so, like, there's so many good candidates there.
Yeah. And that's the problem too, is, that could drive you crazy trying to, okay, why isn't he getting the save today? And, especially because if you're chasing that specifically, it's easy to look at a guy's stats at the end of the year and say, okay, well, he's worth this, but you didn't have him active at the right times or anything like that. And that's the tricky part there when you're playing categories.
Yeah, I rode the Kendall Graben train last year. I remember, that frustration of he pitched so well and you're just like, oh, come on, like just get a save for me, please, while you're on my active roster.
The other thing I like to do is when there's some uncertainty in a bullpen, taking the second guy that goes in some of these teams. Like, for instance, in Pittsburgh, Chris Stratton's going like super late. And Bednar is probably a better pitcher, but Stratton's not bad in his own right as a reliever, and he has the trust of the manager. He closed the door a few times last year. Who's to say that he as the veteran, he doesn't get the opportunity? And yet everybody's treating Bednar like he's locked in and he's a rock-solid closer. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think Cincinnati's another team. Last year we saw how readily David Bell will change his closers. I like Lucas Sims the best, but why not throw a late pick at Art Warren? I think he's another guy that I think could be pretty useful. And if you're playing in the draft champions leagues, 15 teams, 50 rounds, finding a guy that gets you 10 saves is huge in that league.
Is there a Rockies closer that either of you will draft ever in any league?
So it's funny you asked that because I put Estevez in my queue the other day in one of my leagues and I took him back out. I couldn't. I just couldn't.
I had Daniel Bard in NL Labor last year, and only I'll take one of those pitchers if I'm confident enough in the rest of my ratios, but that's about it.
I did have Carlos Estevez last year in NFBC main event on the last day. Remember, he gave up that walk-off homer to Arizona. If I get a save or if I get a win, we get a cashing spot there. We would have gotten third place in our main event league. Instead, he gave up the walk-off, finished fifth in that league. No money. So no Estevez for me. Now, when a guy burns you, are you of the notion he owes me and I'm going to go back, or wash my hands of him, walk away? How do you approach guys like that?
Depends on if they pitch in Colorado or not.
Yeah, it's good response. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think you know me. I'm value agnostic, so it really comes down to value. If the player's undervalued, I just kind of cringe a little bit maybe, but I'll still take him. But if he's overvalued, it's like nah, I'll pass. Usually there's opportunity because people remember the failures and they remember the last bad week or two. They don't think back to the whole season.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's very few players that I won't have on my roster for $1.
Right.
There's a price for everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. And price and intersecting with opportunity. We're going to do bounce back players, and here, this is where we do the OU versus walk away thing. And I know Mike's guy is one of those guys I whiff badly on. So let's get it out there. In fact, if you want to mention a couple guys, you can. Mike, who do you have as your bounce back players that you can get for cheap?
I have two. I'm wondering which one you're talking about. One of them is Clint Frazier.
Yep.
Just to start with him, I was in on him last year for the first time. I know some people have been in on him for years, and he had that good 2020, and then they moved on. I think he just needed a change of scenery. New York and Clint Frazier were oil and water. I know Chicago's still a big market, but being in a smaller market might help a guy like that who just called too much attention to himself. And some of it was in New York media, I mean, if we're being honest. But I still think there's talent there, and there's certainly opportunity in Chicago, as we've talked about before. And he's just super cheap. He might not work out, but it's not like this is like a garbage player who's just going to work his way into time. I think he could be like a 200-ish player, and he's being drafted, I think, at about 420. Second guy's Willy Calhoun. Man, I love Willy Calhoun. He's just had so much bad injury luck, like that hit by pitch. And then last year he got hurt. I know it's only was half a season that he was on, but when he was on, he was really on. I think there's some real easy power there. I know Texas is a pitcher's park, but I think even in that park, that power can play up to 25, 30 home runs if he gets the opportunity. And that opportunity could be there. I know they brought in Cole Calhoun, and they were tied at one point. I don't know if are they still tied to Suzuki? You mentioned the Arizona training thing. I don't know if they're one of the 4 teams or not, but yeah, I could still see Calhoun if they don't sign Suzuki, getting into a starting gig. So yeah, those are my two. Yeah,
I know Seattle, Cubs, San Francisco. maybe the fourth is the Rangers. I'm not quite sure who the fourth is. I could look it up because that would be in front of me and I could use it.
Levi Weaver mentioned it, but I don't know if he mentioned it as like a definite or it was just speculating.
Yeah, and and even that report about narrowing it down to a Final Four could be speculation just to try to drum up more offers. Padres are the fourth. It is not the Rangers, for what it's worth. Yeah, Frazier was my guy. I was aggressively wrong on him. I got him like 10th, 11th round and 15 teamers last year. I was like, oh yeah, he hit fourth a lot last year. Well, lots of people were gone last year too, but in 2022. And then the thing is, it is the media. I think that was an issue. It's not necessarily market size. It's an aggressive media, and just so many different sources cover teams there. In Chicago, I mean, you have 2 newspapers. You don't have 7. You've got that a little bit there too. Chicago media can be tough, but I think New York's just its own special case, and everybody else is kind of in the next level there.
Yeah, every town is like a football. Every town is a football town, but New York, and if you've ever lived in New York, and Chris, it's a baseball town, and it's a Yankees town, really. It's if you're a Yankee, the spotlight's on.
Man, I'm from Staten Island. Everyone Yankee fan. Everyone.
Yeah.
And so that's why you're a Mets fan, right?
Yes. Yeah. Very, very contrarian over here.
Nice.
No, I very, very quickly. I'm a Mets fan because I was a Yankee fan up until the year 2000, and then I was like, yeah, go to heck, Dad. I'm going to be a Mets fan now. So
okay,
real good decision.
Great decision on that one. Nice. Yeah. Bonding. All right. Who is your bounce back candidate, Chris?
Speaking of the Mets, really, pick one, anyone. I want to focus on JD Davis here, although I do think Jeff McNeil is also a fantastic candidate. I was talking to Joe Lowry of Prospects Live yesterday, discussing McNeil because I was looking through his profile, and everything in McNeil's profile looks pretty similar to when he was good. So I don't think he's far off from just being what he was before. But yeah, I wanted to talk about JD Davis specifically. He had a miserable year. There's not really any two ways about it. But he was dealing with a hand wrist injury. This seems like classic LOL Mets, where as soon as the season was over, this injury that they downplayed all year, he immediately got surgery after multiple reports throughout the year that it's not that bad. He can play through it. It'll be fine. No surgery needed. We all know what hand and wrist injuries do to a guy's power, unless your name is Matt Olson. It's notoriously a power sapping kind of injury. I think JD Davis is young enough. He's 28, I believe. I see no reason for him to not just be what he was, which is just a really good all-around hitter. Puts the bat on the ball, capable of elevating. The caveat here, and I'm going to mention this again a bit later with another pick. I realized I leaned heavily on NLDH candidates. We need a DH in the NL. Otherwise, JD Davis is liable to, maybe not clear 350 plate appearances. So if there's an NLDH, I'm all over JD Davis.
Are you presuming that there's going to be one? Like when you do your rankings or when you do your draft decisions, are you assuming there's going to be a DH?
I am. But full disclosure, I'm not drafting yet. I'm terrified to draft at this point. I feel like if I draft, the season will start later. But it seems like neither side is benefiting by holding out on the DH, right?
I agree.
In theory, that's why I'm ruled by logic. I know MLB and the owners aren't necessarily, but it seems like it's a no-brainer to me. So I'm operating based on that.
Yeah, there was a time where, and Jeff, you're old enough like me, you remember when teams carried 15 hitters and, a team with a DH, you could just have a DH. But with such thin benches, it's difficult. I think the DH actually benefits NL teams because you don't have to now be in that situation where you have such a short bench. It just works out. And I don't think there will be too many true DHs added. So it's not even this big cost bump that they used to be worried about like a couple of generations ago.
Right. Their insistence on using this as a bargaining chip when like, oh, but if you give us the expanded playoffs, we'll give you a DH. It's like here, if we give you 5 cents, we'll take $2.
Well, yeah, the other thing that's stupid about it is, as far as mitigating pitcher injury, it's one of those things where it's like, why wouldn't you want to protect pitchers you're spending tens of millions of dollars on per season by keeping them, off the base pass and at the plate? I know some of them like to hit. I get that. I also get a pitcher can't get hurt, doing anything, but it just seems like a way that it's another win for the owners. Like, it just doesn't really make sense for it not to happen.
Right.
I mentioned that I'm really good at sidetracking conversations, right?
Yeah, well, no, I think this is good. This is good.
Have you listened to our podcast? We that's all we do is sidetrack conversations.
That's a sign. It's actually a conversation, not just reading off lists. That's totally fine. And I think good podcasts are typically that.
But so one other player that I want to mention, not a hitter, Corey Kluber. Corey Kluber to the Rays. As long as his shoulder doesn't fall apart, love taking him in the 300s.
Yeah,
I'm shocked that he's in the 300s. Honestly, I'm really surprised that he's going so low.
I agree. We did the XFL draft in December, and I got Corey Kluber for $1 to fill out my roster, 15-team mixed league. I'm like, Rays Magic, let's go. I mean, why not? I think it's perfect as an end game sort of guy. I like him a lot there, and he showed the glimpses with the Yankees too. Now he showed the fragility too. We got both of those things going on, but why not? And they're going to optimize him. Just please go 5 at least. That's all I ask. Just go 5 or have an opener. Please just have an opener. Get the Yarbrough treatment, and we'll be good.
God, that would be fantastic. I would love it.
Yeah. My bounce back guy, and this is kind of cheating because he's like 302, is Carlos Carrasco. When healthy, whenever he's been healthy, he's been good. But last year he dealt with the super hamstring injury, then the thumb injury, then he had a bone fragment removed from his elbow after the season. Hey Mets, you're counting on the Mets medical staff, and it's funny. The regimes change and the medical staff remains the same, it seems like, but I know that's unfair to the actual trained professionals that are trying to take care of these guys, but it's surreal to see all this stuff that happens after the fact with these players. But we have a full off season for him to recover. He's a guy that's a strikeout in an inning sort of guy. I think there's a really good chance he bounces back, and the expectations are so low for him now. He's going to probably slot in as their 4th starter. I think that's ideal. In fact, I know it doesn't even match up all the time, but early on in the season, he's going to be matching up against lesser pitchers probably too. Good ballpark to pitch in. Yeah, sign me up. I'll take him.
It's got to be like moving into a haunted house for those training staffs. It's like, why is all this happening? I don't understand.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would just add to that, I looked at Carrasco, I considered him. Steven Strasburg's another one. I'm really a fan of these pitchers and Kluber too, to a lesser degree, but at these pitchers past 300 where it's like, well, what do I have to lose? Like, if Steven Strasburg doesn't throw an inning at this price, I don't really care. Like, I don't have much of an investment. I'll find pitching, later on. These pitchers like this who could, be like top 100, top, 150 pitchers, I'm all in on just taking a stab on 1 or 2 of them late.
Yeah, you'd rather take. Go ahead.
So I feel like I'm going to get a talking to from Nick after this panel, because I'm very notoriously anti-old pitcher, and I just talked up Corey Kluber publicly. So I'm sure Nick is going to do some gloating after this.
Yeah, but here's one of the points though too is like when you're drafting this late plus 300, you want to go for upside. You want to find the guy that if things go right, he's going to be awesome. I'm trying to remember the phrase that Nick uses for guys that are just so middling. Like he compared Steven Matz to us here. You don't want Toby's. Yes. Thank you. Carlos Carrasco is either going to be great or, you'll move on from him. You'll be hurt and you move on. He's not going to be a Toby. And I feel pretty confident about that. So I think, you can't have a staff full of these guys. But if you've built your base, these are pitchers you're either going to stream in or guys that move up to become a base. They don't Toby their way through a season.
This is a mistake, like, Jeff, I used to play solely only leagues, a mistake I used to make where I would get a bunch of the middling guys, because in an only league, you need some of that. Like, you need some of those players who are going to produce, give you volume, because volume is king. So in mixed leagues, I would take some of these players on reserve, and I learned, the hard way, it's just a waste of your reserves. You can maybe take one guy like that or two guys like that, particularly if you have an injured player that you drafted in the active phase. But yeah, this is where you gamble for the most part.
Yeah, I will say you identifying upside sometimes, you can overlook guys. One of my most notorious calls ever was saying Rick Porcello had no upside whatsoever, and then he won the Cy Young. So you can be wrong about that too. Now, granted, he still didn't have a high strikeout ceiling. I should have said he had no strikeout upside, and I would have been fine. But that. You got to call out your misses. Some people like to tweet about their good calls and all that. Take the victory laps. I like to take defeat laps. I think that's my thing.
Why not both?
Yeah, defeat sprints. I guess
the only thing that makes me feel okay about taking victory laps is because I take those defeat laps.
Yeah, you got to have I guess what's the right phrase, right? But you got to be able to own up to your mistakes. That's for sure. And you know what? The easiest articles to write too are the lessons learned. You do your post hoc analysis from a bad league or a bad call. What did I miss here? You know what? It's good content. Because then you dive into a player, and it gives you some credibility too to admit that you can make mistakes.
Yeah, and I find I really learned some from writing those articles. Like I write them, and at the end, I'm like, wow, like I really see what I did wrong here, as opposed to if I just ignore it and make the same mistakes the next year.
Right. Let's move on to the lesser valued prospects, guys that let's face it, we all everybody's all over Bobby Witt. We know that. We know there's other top prospects that are getting taken in the top 300. I try not to take too many of those guys in the top, in my top 20, in the top 20 rounds of a 15-team draft anyhow, just because you don't know they're going to get the playing time. But I don't mind taking a guy or two late, and especially in a draft champions league where there's no pickups, there's some real fruit to be found. Chris, why don't you start us off with this? Who's the prospect you're going to go after?
Sure. Circling back to that NLDH thing, fingers crossed on that, because otherwise this guy's going to be worthless in fantasy. Juan Yepez of the St. Louis Cardinals. And you might be going, who? And that's because he was a complete pop-up prospect. From 2015 to 2019, he hit a total of 26 home runs while being always really young for his level. And then this year alone, he hit 27. And then another 7 in the Arizona Fall League. Arizona Fall League stats this year, huge grain of salt. It was a wild offensive environment. But I think his hitting also came with continued good plate discipline. He still walked like 12% of the time, struck out about 18% of the time. And that's what I'm more drawn to. The power is there. Great. Lots of people have power. But when you have power and an approach, that's when I start getting interested. And Yepez basically was a top 10 hitter in the minors this year. Taking all of double and triple A together, he had the 8th highest WRC plus. You've heard the names around him. You've got your Nick Prado, your Riley Green, your MJ Melendez, Jose Miranda, a lot of guys that we're hoping to see this year. And I think that Yepez has some of the best opportunity there if that DH spot is available. Right now, Roster Resource has Paul DeYoung slotted in as the DH. You're talking about a glove first shortstop as the possible DH. That should not fly long term. So I think the opportunity is there, and I think the bat is legit. And this big hat tip here to Rick of Pars List fame. His star shone really bright this past offseason as he did some numbers-based prospect analysis. He's the one who tipped me off to Juan Yepez.
Nice. So DeYoung is not your bounce-back candidate then?
Very much no. Unless he got to play the Mets 162 times, then he'd be the best hitter in the league.
Yeah.
He's a notorious Met killer.
It's like Ian Happ, if he played the Reds, would be Babe Ruth. But, definitely. Greg was asking who my bounce back guy was. Real quick, that was my guy was Carlos Carrasco as the bounce back guy. We saw that in the chat there. Crying asks, what about my man Lars Nootbaar? What do you guys think about that? Since you're on the St. Louis track, what do you think about him?
I know I talked him up at some point during the season, but I haven't really looked at him over the offseason, so I don't have anything fresh in my mind about him. I hope he's got a spot just so that we could say Nuke Bar a lot.
Right.
Do you guys have anything on him?
Yeah,
I just
not
get
really.
hungry every time I see his name. That's all.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a solid role player. It's just sort of tough in fantasy. You hit the nail on the head, Chris. Like the role, I'm not sure how that's going to materialize. And he's not the kind of player, like if he's getting 400, 450 plate appearances, I really kind of see the value in, keeping on reserve and, mixing and matching.
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing is, I liked all the Cardinals outfielders, and they still got to find room for Nolan Gorman at some point in time. Thought about Gorman, but in fact, I've rostered him in a couple of places, but playing time is also a huge concern for him too. I don't know how they're going to make that work. I wish he could play shortstop. Then we could just have that conversation, but he cannot, alas. So we'll move on. But I think Carlson's a big breakout guy this year. I think he more than held his own at a really young age. I like what I like his approach. Newpar's going to he needs an injury to kind of really get that opportunity. Mike, who's the later prospect target for you?
So Chris mentioned him, and it's MJ Melendez, who certainly isn't a sleeper as a prospect. I mean, we all know who he is, but I actually only found this out recently. We're talking about learning things. So a week or two ago, I had him way down my list because I'm like, he won't play. Salvi Perez is there, but Alec Lewis at The Athletic, who is tremendous, by the way, covering the Royals. There's a lot of talk about Melendez playing another position. And so you kind of get that golden catcher eligibility, with the player not having to catch, not having to wear down, not having to worry about resting. I don't think Melendez will be up on opening day, but I think they're really trying to clear a path for the bat. I mean, the bat is special. Like if you've seen film of him, if you've watched him play, I think they're really going to make an effort to make a room for that bat in that lineup. So, people talk about Prado. He's good too. And, the Royals story as far as developing those hitters, and a lot of them struggled in Wilmington in 2019. This was a case where the pandemic really helped out in 2020 in terms of the team and the hitting philosophy. They sat down with a number of these players, and Melendez was one of the biggest success stories where altered his approach a little bit, changed things up. He's not getting 40 bombs in the majors, as a rookie, of course. But I guess I look at Adley Rutschman. People are like, even if he's not on up opening day, he'll have value. Well, that's true. The same is true of Melendez, but he's just going so much later. And you're talking about in a two-catcher format, I don't mind taking a guy like Melendez at all and maybe just sitting on him for a month and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I mean, the Royals have a lot of different options, and they have, in terms of prospects getting called up, Prado, Melendez, even Vinny Pasquantino. I mean, you could make a case. He was in Double-A last year. They'll probably take their time with him, but he could knock on that door. And it's Kyle Isbell and Hunter Dozier holding him back. Not really holding him back.
That's what it. Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, they've got 2 or 3 slots where, and Carlos Santana, it's a big contract or big year left on the contract, but they've got some slots where they can mix and match if they need to.
Carlos Santana, he's under the radar either for how good he is or how bad he is in a given year. Last year, I mean, he had 650 plus plate appearances of 214, 319, 342. That's your first baseman. I mean, that's just draining your offense there. There's no reason. He had
a wrist. He had 2 injuries. He had a hip injury and a wrist injury, and the wrist injury pretty much just knocked his power out completely. The eye was still there. And the contact was still there, but he just couldn't drive the ball. So he's one of those players. It's tricky. If he's healthy, he could go back to being the boring, Carlos Santana, who's going to be a decent, first baseman. But he's also old enough that I am a little concerned that, injured or, healthy or no, he could just disappear.
He could go full Pujols on us this year and, give
possible.
way to the prospect there. So we'll see. My guy is Ronzi Contreras. I like to say Rowanzi, first of all, but he after the Tyon trade, he showed a lot. I thought both in the minors and his couple of appearances at the big league club. I don't mind that the Pirates added some veterans to eat up innings. I think this is actually good for him in a way. I mean, gets him some time. He's not under pressure to produce right away, but I mean, at some point in time, Jose Quintana is not going to stand in the way of him. Max Kranick is not going to step in the way of him. I like the things that Contreras brings to the table. I like the strikeout ability. I think there's a really good opportunity that he could be their best guy. Now, I worry a little bit about health. That forearm strain that he had last year is a concern. But he's around pick 450. I think he's a guy that could provide some upside. The only caveat I'll say is rostering guys like this from a bad team. Obviously, we play with wins, even though it's not a predictive stat, sabermetrically. It's a fantasy category, unless you're in a very unique league. For the most part, bad teams drag a player's value down.
So, you speaking of the Pirates rotation, how do you feel about Mitch Keller popping 100 in a recent bullpen?
I know that's been the buzz on Twitter this week.
Yeah.
Was it over the plate?
Yeah.
Okay.
No batter, but hey.
I just, if you beat me with Mitch Keller, good for you. I mean, he's going to come. He comes at a good price. I get that. I just worry about the walks. I just hate watching guys that nibble on my roster. It drives me nuts. Just trying to deal with roster players like that. But you know what? Sometimes they get it together. Sometimes they figure things out. They get the right staff to work with a player. Sometimes things change. Can the Pirates do that for him? I'm not sure. What do you guys think?
We kind of talk about the Mets and LOL Mets. Like the thing about the Pirates, they're like a small market LOL, and they just can't seem to get it together with prospects. So I hope Keller gets it together because the talent's certainly there, but the track record for them as a team just really makes me skeptical. And with Contreras, going back to him, it's not just the wins; it's that feeling of I know he looks really good, and the price is certainly right, but I just Pirates, there's almost a little bit of a discount built in for me because I just feel they're developmentally they don't quite compared to other teams.
Especially when you see all their guys go elsewhere and then break out. I mean, that's the thing that's got to be especially big eye when you're a Pirates fan. I mean, that's the one thing you have is you need to be good at development. I mean, if you're not going to spend the money on bringing people in, you better develop these guys. Maybe they did with Contreras. I mean, that was his star shone a little brighter after that. So, we'll see about that. Paul Sporer does comps better than I do, and he says we have Alex Bregman here with Chris. So well done, Paul. Anyways, do you have a take on Mitch Keller, Chris?
That's one you mentioned before. Will I go back to the well if a player burns me repeatedly? Yes, in my NL only specifically. If a league is deep enough, there's a price on everyone. I will absolutely get burned again by Mitch Keller in a deep enough league this year. I will almost guarantee that I'll roster him at some point in that NL only league this year.
I didn't send this question on the list because it's just kind of spur of the moment here. But is there a player that you're known for as your guy? And it might be a guy that you've been burned by a lot. I'll go in the Wayback Machine. Austin Kearns. It's always was my guy. I rostered him maybe 10 years in a row, I swear. But I think even after he retired, I think I still said maybe he's got a chance. I don't know, but him and Jeremy
that takes me back.
Yeah,
because my first fantasy baseball sleeper ever was Adam Dunn when he still stole bases.
Yes. Hey,
wow.
He was a quarterback in high school. Yeah, definitely. Mike, do you have a guy?
I really don't. I tend to sort of bounce around. My way back guy was Jorge Posada. I got him cheap in a home league and then just kept him. And then when he had to go back in the free agent pool, I just kept taking him. I mean, he was perfectly fine though. I mean, it wasn't one of those cases of I'm sorry I have Jorge Posada. It was more like, why do people let me keep getting him? So that one worked out pretty well.
Oh man, Jorge, man, I love this. I love any situation where I can just remember some guys. That's like my favorite thing in baseball.
Tout Wars, I was known for overpaying for Brett Laurie that the year after his half-season breakout.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, I still get people throwing that one at me every once in a while.
Or Gordon Beckham. There's another one.
I missed that one.
Never could quite break out.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of players I might be known for. Historically, probably not really. So I'm a relatively fresh face in all of this. I only started really doing the fantasy analysis seriously probably a year ago. So I don't know if I really had any guys this past year, but I will say I'm going to have a guy this year, and that is O'Neal Cruz.
Okay.
I plan on talking about him a lot. My guy this past year, who I talked about way more than he deserved, was Sam Huff, who never saw a plate appearance this year. So that was
I
fun.
drafted him. I drafted him in mixed labor this year, because we have a February draft. I'm like, oh, he's got this power. Yeah. And I'm waiting on catcher. Let's go. Let's do this.
My type is really large people who hit the ball really, really far. And Sam Huff is a 6'5" catcher who hits 500-foot home runs. I'm like, yes, I want more of that. And I hope we see him this year. You think Jonah Heim's going to block him?
He has first base only eligibility, though, in a lot of leagues, which is cruel.
Rough.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to tell the future there.
Question from Leahy, M82. He goes, how do you feel about Kristen Casas this year? There's a lot of talk about him adding some weight, adding some power. Already has some pretty decent skills. Might have the opportunity in Boston pretty quickly. What do you guys think about him?
I love anytime a player says, like, I'm just going to do this now. Like when Joey Votto's like, I'm just going to hit for power now. Like Casas was recently quoted as saying, like, I was focused on getting on base, getting that OBP up. Now I'm going to try to hit for power. And I hope he makes it happen because I love that kind of thing. Like Charlie Morton just deciding I'm going to throw hard now. So I'm excited to see what Casas does now that he's made that decision.
It's like the old internet argument that, Ichiro could hit for power if he wanted to. Pete Rose could hit for power if he wanted to. If Mike would get that one. They're the Rec Sport Baseball. We go way back in the day. But, I could see it. I have him in a couple of keeper situations. And he's another guy, prospect-wise. He's still coming relatively affordable, but starting to creep up to the Riley Green price now that you're going to have to pay a little bit more for him.
Yeah, my concern about Casas is I really like him long term. I feel the Red Sox might leave him down for at least half a season and let that power develop in AAA. So, if you're just looking at redraft, that's my only concern with Casas. If you're drafting him aggressively, or in a league like NFBC where your reserve spots are limited, you're kind of stuck, and you're waiting and waiting, and you're finally like, well, I shouldn't have sat on him for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, that's absolutely an issue there. And sometimes you wait and wait. He gets that chance, and they send him right back down. I'm looking at you, Vidal Brujan, there from last year. Brujan, his ADP is like around 300. I tweeted about this earlier. I don't see it. I just don't see the path to playing time. I see the stolen base upside. I see, it could happen, but I wonder if he can hit at the big league level, and I wonder if the Rays are going to give him a chance.
It's that last part that I worry about.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I could see the Jonathan VR 2021 path to value where he gets enough time at every position, but that's a tough path for a rookie. Like it's something when you're a veteran and you've been on a team for a while and you're used to sitting. I think it's tough to ask a rookie to do that. Maybe he can do it. I don't know, but it does seem like a lot to ask. I'm rooting for him because he's a fun, exciting player to watch when he's running the bases. But yeah, I don't know. I'm fine with that price because I feel like he's cheap enough. Again, if he doesn't work out, you just kind of cut him. But to the point I was making about Casas, if you sit there and wait, you might be disappointed.
Well, I gotta jump in here. It's at 9 o'clock. Look at you guys, amazing panel. Schwebs, it was JD Davis was your correct answer. I don't know why. That is the guy you always go to. And yeah, Corey Kluber. I'm so shocked by you. He's got to get his cutter back, and if he does that, then everything is fine. But I'm touched to talk about Toby's. I'm touched about everything that you did to show up here today to help support this cause. So Jeff, Mike, Chris, thank you guys so much for being a part of this.
Anytime.
Yeah, thanks for having